which percentage of rent can be claimed as a travel nurse? When you lease a vehicle as a company, can you pay it directly from your business account? Dividend is great for saving taxes, but is that the ideal thing for you? It's an individual question. Once you become a company, you are your own employer, and your company has to withhold taxes from you and send that payroll remittance to the government every month. Hey, everybody, we're going live inside the Canadian Contract Nurses Facebook group with Minette, who is a Canadian contract nurse, myself, and I'm an accountant. And today we just want to be here to be of service to the community because I know that a lot of people within your community, Minette, have a lot of questions. I want to preface this conversation here today by saying whatever information we're sharing here today, it's not a one size fit all for everyone. The information is going to be relevant to every single person who is a Canadian travel nurse or Canadian contract nurse. But please speak to an accountant. You can speak to me. At the end of this, I'm going to share how you can contact me directly to see how this applies specifically to your situation. So as you join us, please, if you do have a question, please put it in the chat. Now that said, hey Minette.
Hi, everybody. My name is Minette, and I'm an RN. I'm a registered nurse, and I have been a travel nurse since 2019. And, I've been enjoying the journey, and I've watched travel nursing in Canada become a real thing, whereas before it wasn't really a thing. So with that, I've accumulated a lot of knowledge about travel nursing, and my goal is how can I help my fellow colleagues who are new into the career, who are void of information, they lack information, and they really want to know how to go about being a travel nurse. It's not just about picking up the assignments, traveling to fancy locations, getting up hefty paychecks, and snapping out of it. No, there's a whole lot that comes with being a travel nurse. You have to focus on the money you're being paid. How do you manage it, and how do you stay out of trouble by making sure you have the proper accounting and making sure that your taxes are well managed and they're well catered to, because there's so many accountants out there. I've had good accountants and I've had bad accountants. I've been in debt because of poor tax filing, and so with my experience, I'm trying not to let my colleagues go through the same scenario by working with professional accountants with good reputations. Yeah, so today I have Ida on here. Ida has been working with my WhatsApp group for a while now. She's been educating together with another accountant. They've been educating the nurses about how to properly manage your accounts and prepare your tax, how to file your tax, what's the difference between incorporation and sole proprietor. So today we're going to be focusing on the difference between sole proprietorship and incorporation because somebody brought that up. And yeah, with that, also, if you have any questions, just like Ida said, please feel free, shoot it in, and make sure you're able to reach us on Facebook or YouTube so that we can answer your question. Over to her, Ida.
Okay, so one of the things that I know a lot of people are very confused about is about being incorporated versus being sole proprietorship. And in speaking to a lot of the nurses, people don't seem to understand that once you become incorporated, it's a separate entity from you.
Mm-hmm.
I've spoken to somebody who was like, okay, I work these hours and I make all this money and the money gets into my business bank account and I'm just pulling all of it out.
Yeah,
There are
we had.
people, yeah, there are people who do that. They pull out all of the
Mm-hmm.
money from the account and they don't realize that, hey, that money is not yours. Yes, you worked. Yes, you earned the money, but it's your company that earned the money. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's one important distinction that has to happen there. So if you could tell me, for example, being a travel nurse yourself, what is it that you find to be a very common problem or a very common challenge that your colleagues or yourself would be having? So I can dive into that, addressing that specifically.
Okay, so speaking of me, I pretty much know my way around it. Right, I've been doing the education, so I understand my way around it. But I do know that there are still a lot of my colleagues who do not know what sole proprietor is like. It's just like a foreign word in the whole nursing field. We're used to working as employees. Right. So
Mhm.
sole proprietor is like, what is the meaning of this word anyways? Like, where does it even stem its roots from? Or incorporation, like, what is incorporation? Like, what is that word? What does it even really mean? What's the basic meaning? And I feel like once I was able to understand the meaning of the words themselves, it helped me to understand why they are used in the whole accounting field, right? Like sole proprietor, my colleagues, they need to understand that sole proprietor is like you're a self-employee, you're your employer, you're working for yourself, but you're not a company, but you're working for yourself.
Okay, let me go into explaining those three main differences. And thank you, because it's
Mhm.
sometimes I go into this and I start to explain the things that are like more advanced when we actually just need to come back to the basics. Like, let
Yes.
me even understand what is going on here. Who am I? So,
Mhm.
for the most part, like everybody has had the experience of being an employee. When you're an employee, you go to work for somebody and they give you a paycheck at the end of every month. By the time they give you a paycheck, they have pulled out your taxes from it. They would take care of remitting your taxes to the government, the payroll deductions. They would take care of remitting that to the government. That is the regular everyday person. You work at McDonald's, you work for a firm, you work at a hospital as an employee on their payroll. They would pay you, say they pay you what, $50 an hour, for example. But what you
Mhm.
see in your paycheck comes out to maybe like closer to like 30 something dollars per hour because they have taken out your taxes. That's an employee. Now, when you go from being an employee to being a sole proprietor, which is what, because from what I've seen, when most nurses or most travel nurses or contract nurses go to work for an agency, the agency says you need to give us your business information. You're self-employed. You're not
Mhm.
on our payroll. We're just going to pay you your per hour thing and then you take care of it. Now, the important distinction there has to happen between, are you a corporation or are you just contract worker
Self-employed.
working in your name, self-employed?
Mhm.
So if you are sole proprietor, self-employed, or you're a company, if they're paying you, I'm going to use very simple round numbers, $50 an hour. If they're paying you $50 per hour and you are self-employed, that money comes into your hands, right? You're going to take that $50 per hour. They're not deducting any taxes from it. You take all of that money. At the end
Mhm.
of the year, whatever
Mhm.
money you received becomes your income, and you have to pay taxes, less whatever deductions you might have, whatever regular expenses. You would have to pay taxes on all the money that came into your hands. If
Mhm.
you were a corporation, you're not paying taxes on the money that came into your hand and stuff like that. You're paying taxes on the withdrawals that you make from your company. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, for
So
sure.
if the agency pays you a total of $150,000 in the year,
Mhm.
if it pays that to your corporation, now your corporation, it doesn't mean that you made 150, it means your corporation made 150 that year. Now,
Mhm.
if you have put yourself as an employee within your corporation, how much is it you're paying yourself from your corporation? Now your corporation can withhold taxes from your own paycheck now, paying you. It's not
Mhm.
the agency paying you anymore, it's your
Mhm.
corporation paying you.
Right.
So once you create a corporation, there are three separate entities now involved in this. There is the agency that pays your corporation, and then your corporation that pays you.
Right.
But when you don't create a corporation, then that agency is paying you directly, but not as an employee, it's paying you as a sole
A self
proprietor,
right.
self-employed. Yes.
Mhm.
Now, if you're not aware of that, you get to the end of the year and you have a lot of taxes to pay because you never took the time within the year to maybe understand what it is that was going on, why it is the way it is, and what funds you need to put by the side to make sure that when the time comes, you
For
have the money set
taxes.
aside to take care of those taxes.
Mhm.
And so if those basics are understood, then it's going to take away for a lot of people the confusion of like, hey, but it's my money. Why am I going to be taxing myself twice for it? But you're not.
Mhm.
Yesterday, somebody sent a question within the Facebook
Yeah,
group.
that was the person's question. So he said my agency put my per diem on my T4A and then they refused to amend it. Accountant says I have to claim as income and be taxed. Yeah, I think so too. Taxes filed. What should or can I do?
Okay. The thing you need to understand is what is the nature of it. So my understanding of what the per diem is you're being paid per day.
Mm-hmm. Per work day, yeah.
You're being paid per work day. Okay. So it is income. So whatever
Mm-hmm.
income you have will be included on whatever tax slip is issued to you. Now the question
Mm-hmm.
is, did they issue it to the right name? So for example, if you are a corporation and you were billing them as a corporation, did they issue the T4A to your corporation, or did they issue the T4A to your social insurance number?
Right.
Because I've seen that as well, right? People go there and they work as corporations, but at the end of the day, they get a T4A in their name, in their social insurance number.
Right.
So if he is there, I would like him to kind of clarify a few things right there. But yes, it is income. Yes, it will be put on a T4A. Now, who is the T4A issued to? If you're a sole proprietorship, it goes to a T4A that's in your social insurance number. If you're a corporation, they don't need to issue a T4A, but some people still go ahead and issue T4As to corporations. Now, you just need to know that it has to be included in the taxes of your own corporation, which if you are doing your bookkeeping, of course, you will have included it in your income in doing your bookkeeping. Because when you're doing your own bookkeeping, right, in the corporation, you're already including every pay that came to you as income in the I like using QuickBooks. So when I'm doing that for some people, like I already show everything that is being included, that was deposited into their bank account. All of that income gets shown in their income. But now from that, what expenses did you have? Those expenses will be deducted, and you're only going to be paying taxes on the net income. You don't pay taxes on the gross. So back to your simple question, is it normal that they're putting my per diem as income? Yes, because it is
Mm-hmm.
income. That's the nature of
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah, yeah. All of my per diems have always been included into my income. So it just comes as a yearly package. Like this is what I was compensated for the whole year. So yeah, I've always had to pay taxes on them, unfortunately. But then you can write them off by presenting your receipts too, right?
Yes, so whatever expenses are allowed, and there are quite a few expenses. Now, let me just pop over a screen here and share something. Those on Instagram and TikTok, if you want to see the screen, you need to head on over to Facebook or YouTube. These are different expenses that are listed on. This is a T2125, which is basically a statement of business activities, a statement of professional income that goes on your personal income taxes. So if you're a sole proprietor, this is one of the forms that once your accountant is doing your taxes, you're going to fill out when they're doing your personal income taxes. Now, the
Okay.
things I've highlighted here are the different expenses that can be deducted. And if the screen is
Right.
not very clear, you can just see it's advertising, meals and entertainment, insurance, interest and bank charges, business taxes, license and memberships, office expenses, office stationery, professional fees. So whatever you pay to your accountant or bookkeeper or legal person, those are things that you will deduct. Management administration fees, rent, repairs and maintenance, salaries. Now, salaries in this case, because you okay, no, this again, this is the sole proprietorship. So salaries here is not what you pay yourself, because it's what you would pay somebody else. Does that make sense?
Can't you be somebody else to your company? Can't you be an because you're
You're
an
not a
employee?
company. As a sole proprietorship, you are not a company. You are the
Okay, no. Okay,
business.
yeah, sole proprietorship. Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, no, that's different. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why
So
you pay somebody else because that person then is employed under your self-employment business.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That makes
And
sense.
and the interesting thing about this one is anybody could be your employee. So for example, you I'm just going to use your case for example, and this is not applicable to you, but I'm just going to use you as an example.
Hmm.
Say, for example, Minette, you are, of course, you're a travel nurse. You do your nursing things, and you don't do your administrative things, but you have hired one of your kids, for example, to take care
Yes.
of your administration. So your
Yes.
kid
Yes.
is the one who does the billing for you. Your
Right.
kid is the one who, let's say you do certain things on social media and stuff, and your kid is your employee who is taking care
Hmm.
of all of those things.
Yes.
If you pay that child a salary, you can deduct the salary as your business expense, so long as it was something that was necessary for you to operate your business,
Yes.
right? So those would be salaries. But what you pay yourself as a sole proprietorship, what you pay yourself is not a salary. It's not going to
Mm-hmm.
be deducted as a business expense, because the net is going to be considered as your income. All of the net is going to be your income.
Right.
Does that make sense? This is just for sole
Oh yeah.
proprietorship.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So going down, there's property taxes, travel expenses, utilities. Now, travel expenses is a very broad category. I'm
Yeah.
going to warn here that the CRA is putting a very big eye, a very watchful eye on travel expenses as a whole,
Okay.
especially within the period of 20, anything that falls within the fiscal year of 2020. So, expect, and that there's a reason for it, right? 2020 was COVID. So if people are like, oh, I was doing a lot of travel, well, we know that there was a lot of lockdowns. So because of that reason, they are kind of putting an eye on elevated travel expenses within that period. But that
Okay.
said, your business is travel. Part of your business is travel. So now it's about looking at which of this actually makes sense, or how do I put it? Again, this is general information. You have to look at it specifically to your particular situation to see what it is
Right.
that's supposed to
Right.
work for you, right? But travel as a whole, in general, it's attracted a lot of attention, especially between 2020 up until the end of 2022. Around that time, it's attracted a lot
Mm-hmm.
of attention. Now, utilities as well, fuel, delivery, and freight. So these are different kinds of expenses that you
Mm-hmm.
can deduct. Now, coming down to the section of home expenses, there's home office expenses. So, in terms of record keeping, I'm not saying go deduct this. I'm saying you should think about this when it comes to time of doing your taxes. These are
Mm-hmm.
possible deductions. How it's going to be applicable to you depends on your individual situation. Now
Right.
we have home office expenses. So there's heat, electricity, insurance, maintenance, your mortgage interest, your property taxes, and other expenses. And those forms, you can get them on the CRA website. But these are all part of the sole proprietorship expenses. You would have a very similar set of things on the corporation. But when you're an employee, those things you cannot deduct.
No.
You cannot deduct any of this if you're an
Mm.
employee.
I
So,
mean,
yeah, go ahead.
except you're an employee with a T22 form.
Yeah, employment conditions.
Yeah, like
Yes.
travel. Some people they do have like I used to have that back then.
Yeah,
But that has to
exactly.
be approved by your company, your employer, and signed, and it's a whole different thing. So,
Yeah,
hmm
exactly. So this is just one of the things when you are a sole proprietorship, as part of doing your taxes, that is one of the forms that your accountant is going to fill. When you're a company, it's a whole different ball game because there's a bunch of other things that need to be taken into account when you are
hmm
a company.
right,
So one thing that people do not expect when they are getting into having corporations is the fact that, like I mentioned already, you're completely separate from your business. And so
hmm
that business has to file its own tax return, as well as
right,
you were still going to file your own tax return. So
right,
some people don't take into account the fact that there are two separate entities, you and then the business. And then they
hmm
get surprised when they meet an accountant and the accountant is telling them, hey, it's going to cost you XYZ, it's going to cost you this much to take care of that. And some people get surprised by like, what are you talking about type thing. So
hmm it's a surprise for sure for so many people because, like I said, so many people are just moving between being an employee and then all of a sudden. And the thing is, some agencies tell the nurses that you have to be incorporated for us to work with you. And which I don't think that's appropriate. That is definitely wrong because a nurse should be allowed to be a sole proprietor or an incorporation based on her specific situation. Because some people are only doing this for like a couple of months in a year. They are full time employees, but they just take 1 or 2 months, they go try it out. Or some people just go for 2 weeks and they don't like it. And they don't need to be incorporated to do that amount, to just for that amount of work. That's something to that I'm trying to educate the nurses about. I'm like, an agency should not force you to be incorporated. You can be a sole proprietor.
is it that the agencies, are they trying to communicate that you will not be an employee? And then people assume that by them saying that it means you have to go and incorporate, or are they expressly saying you have to incorporate?
You have to incorporate, otherwise we cannot work with you. I think also that some agencies, to be honest, no offense intended, some agencies are also pretty new, and they need also the education about accounting and taxes. I feel like a lot of them also are new into this business, and they're just following what they hear the mass talking about. They're not fully placed on their feet where
Mhm.
or what they should do, right? So there's lots of awareness, there's lots of misinformation going on with the whole travel nursing thing, because it's a very new line of career that just came into the country, and it's like all nurses are just, everybody's just trying to get a hang of what's going on. And so everybody's saying what they know, what they don't know, everybody's just lost.
Yeah.
Everybody's lost. So, which is one of the main reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I've been in the business for a while, and I think I'm in a good position to help people catch up with where they are lacking.
Hmm. That's
Hmm.
that's very noble. As you're talking, something comes to mind which I just wanted to point out as well. Sometimes incorporation is not all about saving on taxes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's also about the liability which is involved in you doing business.
Right.
So if, for example, because we always talk about the reasons for incorporating, okay, there's going to be like your taxes, this, but one of the most important is about limitation of liability. So in your profession, which is very possible for somebody to get hurt, like life-threatening issues.
Hmm.
Once you are working as you and somebody decides to sue you, they come for you and everything you have.
Yeah.
But if you are a corporation,
And that's
they're
as a
suing the
self-employed.
corporation. Yes, that's as a
Yeah,
self-employed.
that's a self-employed. Yeah.
Because when you're an employee, then it's your employer who's responsible for whatever is happening. When you are
Exactly.
self-employed, they're coming after you. And let's say, God forbid, you did something which is super wrong like that, and then they come after you, and then somehow your mortgage gets involved, that your house gets taken or something because of the amount of liability that you get into. In situations like that, it makes sense, especially when you think about how much liability might be involved. It makes sense to incorporate because now you're acting on behalf of a company. And so if something happens
Hmm.
as well, it's not about like Minette did this. It's Minette's company that's
Yeah.
responsible for it.
Right.
So it might still make sense for some people to incorporate, just depending. It comes down to like individual situations. What is it that would make the most sense for your particular situation, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But I do agree with
And
you. Like the education has to go around, right? It's not only about, I mean, sometimes they're just gonna say go incorporate because that's all they have heard. But I agree with you. It comes down as well to the education piece. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and it also comes down to what works best for everybody. Like somebody who doesn't make even, let's say, up to $50,000 a year from incorporation, somebody who doesn't really put in that much time, maybe just on their break from their regular job, they can just run away for 2, 3 weeks. I've seen people like that. They'll just run away and pick a quick contract and come back.
Yeah.
People like that, do they really need to do all of this payroll? And are they even really saving that much on taxes? It doesn't really add up. It doesn't really work best for them. So that's one thing that I always debunk the story. Like, if an agency forces you to be incorporated, you need to see an accountant to determine your need of incorporation or sole proprietor. You need to
Yes.
see a professional accountant. I think many of us also, like, seeing an accountant sounds like a big deal. Like, oh my God, I was never ever thinking about the existence of an accountant other than when it comes to banking. And now I have to own it, and I have to have
Have
my
an
own
accountant.
accountant. And so many people are like, "Ooh, okay."
It
I have
sounds
a friend
overwhelming,
who,
right?
it sounds overwhelming. And some people are like, "Oh, I have a friend who knows this, who has a friend who does that, that, that." I'm like, guys, you need to see a professional
Yeah.
who knows what they're doing. And also, when they hear the fee of incorporation, right, there's a lot of fee that comes because you're a company, you're a big deal. You're not basic you anymore. You're not an employee anymore. You're not somebody picking up a job from your neighbor's house cleaning and being a self-employed person. You're a
Yeah.
company now, right? So when people hear about it, they just really need to familiarize themselves with the terms and the liabilities that they're signing up for when they want to be incorporated, and see if it's actually the appropriate choice for them, if it's actually the right thing. Because even though I've been doing travel nursing for a while, sometimes I feel like I really don't need to be incorporated. But when I look at the fact that I'm also having a side business,
Mm-hmm.
that's what actually keeps me incorporated, because of my other scrub line
Yeah.
business. But when it comes to my only travel nursing job as on its own, I feel sometimes like I really, really, really do not need to be incorporated. I can survive just being a sole proprietor.
Yeah. So a
Mm-hmm.
couple of things from what you've said. Yes, not everybody needs to be incorporated. You need to consider if that's the best thing for your particular situation. You need to look and see, does it make sense in terms of the amount of taxes I'm going to save, in terms of the liability involved in probably doing this thing, and in terms of the additional administrative commitments that I'm gonna have to do. Because yeah, once you become incorporated, you have to file your corporate income taxes every single year. If you learn how to do your own bookkeeping, you can save some money to not have to pay somebody. But most people are not good at it, and you want to consider the trade-off in time. It's probably better for you to go and pick up some extra shifts, some extra hours, than to sit down to try to figure out your own bookkeeping. But the least you can do is at least keep your records, because if you have your records, you keep track of your mileage, you keep track of your meals, you keep track of those things. You have a separate bank account for the transactions that relate to your activities. We can always play catch up, so you don't have to work with an accountant on an ongoing day-to-day basis, but at least once a quarter, twice a year, at least max once every single year, sit down with somebody, let them look at your situation and see what it is that makes sense. Well, the other point too is once you incorporate, it's like you've given birth to a baby, right? The baby is not just going to disappear. It's there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So actually think about it and see if it's something that would make sense for your particular situation. One thing that I do for a lot of your community here is I say, you know what, this is my calendar, book time on it, sit down, talk with me, and let's see. And I do that for like so many people. It's like free, book a call with me, let's talk, and let's see what it is that makes sense in your situation before you're getting into the commitment of okay,
That's it.
yes, it actually makes sense. Let me take that as my next action step. So you want to have those conversations. Don't just go into something because people say you're going to make money in it. People say this is what I did for me, therefore go and do the same thing. No, have the conversation and check for your personal situation. Yes, it makes sense for A. Does it make sense for B? And does it make sense for me? You want to check those things. I guess it just comes down to being willing to learn. I mean, what you do is already very difficult. If you tell me to put a needle in somebody's hand, I have no idea what I'm doing.
If you tell me to do bookkeeping, I'll kill myself.
Exactly, right? So everybody is good at their own thing. So am I going to sit here and say, hey, I'm sick, but I'm not going to go to the hospital because I don't want to pay whatever, you
Right.
have to go, you have to go and have that consultation and figure out, okay, is this what works for my situation? Is this what makes sense for me? And then
Mm-hmm.
if it does, then yes, you open a relationship with the person, and then you
Yeah.
start to, you have to like your accountant. You have to work with somebody you like. So if you
Mm-hmm.
go and the rapport is not there, please don't work with that person. There are
Mm-mm.
so many, even me as I'm here and I'm speaking, and if you come and you don't like my rapport, don't work with me, right? It's that kind of thing. Like you're building a relationship with a person who, a
Which
professional
going to
relationship,
dig
of
into
course.
your privacy too.
Yes, a person who's going to dig into your, you need to know that, like you need to at least have a likable relationship with the person, and you know that hey, when you want to make these important decisions, I'm going to go talk to this person who I know is in my corner, who is going to advise me not based on what people say, but based
But
on what
based
makes
on.
sense in my
Mm-hmm.
particular situation.
Yeah, and usually it must not always be somebody you know. It must not always be somebody else knows. It can just be somebody that just knows the information. They know what they're doing. Because when I say I've fallen trapped because of know me, know that person, and I had to pay taxes that I wish none of my colleagues have to pay it again.
Can you
You
share
know,
that story, Minette? Because I know you've mentioned it to me, but I don't know. I think there are other people
see,
who've been in the same situation and they think they're alone.
okay. So this is the thing. I'm just gonna give a brush up story,
Yeah,
because of course the person who is the accountant knows me, and I don't want her to feel that bad in case she ever runs into this video, right?
yeah.
But anyway, she
Corporate
wasn't versed
taxes.
with corporate taxes, and she wasn't versed with what to write off, like how to write off things. I think she wasn't really good in general with taxes as well as she was advertised to me. So when she did my taxes, I realized that because I have my own accounting on my Excel, I have my yearly accounting on my Excel where as I'm entering my hours, my day at work, everything, it just calculates right up to the amount of tax that I'm going to. I have it all set up. I
Okay,
worked on that long time ago when I was getting into travel nursing. So I realized that whenever, and I calculate my taxes there based on 30% off.
okay.
Yes, so 30% of my paycheck. And
As a
then for the
30%
whole
tax
year,
bracket, for example. Okay,
yes, my tax bracket that I use there is 30%, just
okay.
in case. And so I realized that even though I took off a lot of money from my taxes, each time I filed my taxes, when she filed my taxes, I still had to pay a whole lot more. So I didn't understand that. So that has happened already for several years. So I ended up being in, I have to run back to work to catch up to pay lots and lots of taxes. And
Mhm.
so I can say, in a year, I've had to pay like way over. Last year, I had to go back to work to pay at least $50,000 in taxes.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot. I don't want to I don't want to be too specific with the information,
Yeah.
but yes, it was way more than that. So
And
but
that was as a sole
just
proprietor, correct?
that was as a sole proprietor.
Okay.
So and then also, like, I used to ask her to educate me about sole proprietor incorporation and all that stuff, and she wouldn't tell me. So I think because she also didn't know how to do incorporation
Yeah.
taxes, she
Yeah.
didn't want to lose me as a client.
Yeah.
So she gave me just the information that I needed to be able to stay with her. And I realized that my deductions were not being taken off. How did I know? When I met another accountant a few months ago, a really good accountant too, and he was the first person that I ever used to educate the group. He
Hmm.
came, and when he did a quick glance at my accounts on CRA, he was like, "Oh, they've not been writing off your 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 your
Deduction. Your expenses.
yes, my deductibles. They've
Yeah.
not been taking it off." I'm like, okay, that makes sense why I have all of those expenses and I still pay a whole lot more taxes. So apparently I have to go back right down to 2019 and clean off all of my taxes back again.
So
And
you're
I'm
gonna
going
refile. Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to have to refile everything and just make sure that they are all well done. I mean, if I'm owing, but at least I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to appropriately do. Because that same accountant just also worked for one of my other clients, one of my other nurses too. She did her taxes. She met him in the group, used him, and she was actually supposed to pay about $23,000 in taxes, but she was able to write off to the extent that she pays just about 8,000. She's owing just about $8,000 in taxes, and she's a sole proprietor, right? So there are accountants there. You guys know what you're doing. There are people there that are just there for the convenience of being an accountant and working at home, right? So, guys, like, seriously, it is not a joke. Like, you gotta use a professional accountant who knows what they're doing, especially those that are bold enough to come on live and do things like that. First of all, they wouldn't come on there and do these lives when they know that they are not competent enough. They wouldn't come there to to sell their faces when when they know they are not that good enough. So follow the person that knows what they're talking about. They are not just sitting down there and wasting their time. They are volunteering for free to educate us. because they know what they're talking about. They're there for us to help us and make us, because the government also is very unhappy with travel nurses as a whole. They feel like they've given us lots of money, and they're gonna look for ways to take that money back. They're gonna look for ways to take that money back. And some people told me that they actually spent everything in their incorporation account. They told them to create an agency, told them to create an account to be incorporated, and so they became incorporated. And
Yes.
then the agency paid them money, and they thought it was their money. They didn't know what all of that money was supposed to be for. So they spent everything.
Yeah.
So let's be educated, pretty
Yeah.
much.
I've spoken to a few people who did that. So one lady I spoke to, she told me, hey, yes, I did create a separate account for my business, and the agency paid me and it went into my business bank account, but I've been paying my mortgage from that account. I've been paying my car loan from that account. And then the rest of the money I've pulled it out and I've used it. And I'm like, what do you mean? I said, it's not your money. It's like, but I'm the one who did it. I'm like, yeah, you did as your company. Now your company has to pay you. Please do not connect your mortgage to your corporate bank account. Like they have their house and they transferred the payment of the mortgage to the corporate bank account. They transferred the payment of their car loans and everything to the corporate bank account, and then they pulled out the difference. I'm like, no, you have to put the money goes into your business bank account. Yes. Now the money goes from your business bank account to your personal bank account for the amount of money you want to pay yourself. And then you set up everything that you're paying for yourself. Your personal life comes out of your personal bank account, and all the other things that are only business related come out from your business account. That's something that if you are in the audience and you are doing that, please, you have to create that distinction between your business and you if you're incorporated. Another thing that came up for me that I saw with one of the ladies was she registered for HST, GST, HST, which I think
Mm,
a lot of people have done. Nursing is not a taxable service. Taxable meaning that, and
it's
there are
not.
different kinds of taxes, so don't get this confused. There's payroll taxes, the sales taxes, the corporate income taxes. Don't get it confused. Nurses, in terms of taxable sales taxes, nursing is not a taxable service. That means
Yeah.
you do not collect HST. But I think
HSC.
the confusion there is because they when they create an invoice to the agency, they call the invoice an HST invoice, where I don't know where that term came from, but they call it an HST
Mm,
invoice. And then the agency is going to pay them, say, $10,000 plus 13% HST, and it's paying them 13, whatever that amount is. And now when I was working with this lady, I said, hey, you have been collecting sales taxes. You're not supposed to collect sales taxes for nursing. So your two options,
she's gonna
well,
have to
first of all,
pay
you
it
should
back.
never have created that account. So if you can send that money back to them and correct your invoices, that's the better option. If not, whatever you've collected, you have to file to the government, and then you have to close the sales tax account because you should never have filed for a sales tax account anyway. And so it's one of those things, that's one of the cleanup that is being done, right? File the sales taxes or reimburse the sales taxes and close the HST account. You're not allowed to collect HST as a nurse, a GST, HST, except in your case, for example, you have a corporation, or if a person has a corporation that does not only the nursing, but you do taxable services in
Service.
it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, or you sell products. So
Mm-hmm.
if nursing agency also sells also sells taxable product, clothes or shoes or whatever it is you're selling, those things you are selling are taxable.
Yeah.
Now, it's not all of your income that becomes sales tax taxable. It's only the things that you sell that are taxable services. Those are the only things. Now, usually when you collect sales taxes, you're able to deduct the sales taxes that you pay as well. But it cannot be on everything because it's only a portion of your income that relates to taxes. Now, only the portion of the expenses that relate to that taxable income also becomes so it's a lot
It's
of work.
complicated. Yeah.
It is complicated, and that's why you need to know what you're doing. Go speak to somebody before you start getting into things you don't understand. You don't, in general, you will not be collecting sales taxes. You don't have to have an HST account. Yeah, those are the two things that came to mind first. And then the third thing
Mm-hmm.
that I just wanted to point out here is there when you're a corporation, there are only two ways that you can take money out of your business. You can take money out as a salary, or you can take
Mm-hmm.
money out as a dividend.
Right.
As a dividend is because you're the owner of the company, and so the company can pay you out dividends. But for your company to pay you dividends, it needs to have retained earnings, because dividends are paid out of retained earnings. What are retained earnings? It's the earnings that is left in the company after all of the business's expenses have been paid. So you
Right.
make 100,000, for example, your business expenses come up to 60,000. There's 40,000 profit in the company. You can pay yourself up to that amount of amount in dividends. But
So, mm-hmm.
whatever you pay as a dividend is not an expense in your business. So you will pay taxes on the 40,000 anyway as a business. And then you receive your dividend, and then you file your personal taxes on whatever is calculated there on the personal side. You will have to pay taxes on that part of it. So again, this is general information. Please book me in private if you want to talk to me and ask me specific questions. Or this is an opportunity for you guys to ask questions if anybody is watching and wants to put something in the comment right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you wanted to say something while I was going on my solo there.
Oh no, I was going to say that just I was going to check on the Facebook and see. Okay. Yeah, no, I was just going to say that in general, right? People should be aware of what they are getting into. They should educate themselves in it, and they should remember that if you're getting into travel nursing, you're not an employee right anymore, and so you have to be very active and involved in your finances. You're no more sleeping passively and waiting for payday. You're now like a full-blown company owner who has to not only be a nurse and be a business owner as well. So there's a whole lot of responsibilities that come in with that, whether sole proprietor or incorporation.
Corporation.
You have to be, yeah, either way you have to make sure that your finances are well catered for. There's a question
Okay.
that came in. No question is dumb,
No
actually.
question is dumb. Thank you. I was gonna say that. Is sole
Mm-hmm.
proprietorship same as employee? No, it's not the same. When you're an employee, you get a paycheck, like you have an employer who is gonna pay you whatever they're paying you, say $50 an hour, they will deduct taxes and they will pay you the difference into, they'll give you a check or they'll do direct deposit or whatever, but they are paying you after having taken out the taxes.
Mm-hmm.
When you are sole
There. Mhm.
proprietorship, they give you the full amount, $50 per hour. You see $50 per hour in your account. Now you have to do your own taxes by yourself.
Yeah,
So no question is dumb. If you have a follow-up question to that, please go ahead and ask.
that's actually a really good question because that's
Yeah.
the basic reason why we're sitting here on this life. That's the
Yeah.
basic reason. Yeah. An
Yeah.
employee, you can be an employee to your company as well as, but with sole proprietor, you're the owner and you're the worker.
Yes. Okay, let me clarify that because it
Mm-hmm.
sounded, I know what you're
A
saying,
little
but it might
yes.
confuse whoever is listening. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're an employee, that one is completely different. Employee, they pay you net. So you have a $50 minus whatever taxes they would withhold and they pay you the difference. That one is said and done. Now, sole proprietorship and then corporation, that is where confusions usually happen. A sole proprietorship means that I, myself, either I go somewhere and I work, they pay me, they give a check to me, $50 per hour, and that's my money. When you are a company, they are paying, yes, I go work and they pay $50 per hour, but it's not to me. They're paying $50 per hour to my company. And now I can become an employee inside my own company and my company pays me whatever I decide that it pays me, which ideally shouldn't be the full $50 per hour because your company has to take care of the other expenses of operating that business.
Mm-hmm. And of being like for being liable to you, the company also has to take care of those expenses as well.
Yes. And your company then would have to pull out, okay, now you become an employee in your own company. So your company, and this is something, it's some minute difference as well, again, that I've seen a lot of times with travel nurses. Your company gets paid $50 per hour. you go and pull out the full $50 per hour. But you forget that your company now is your employer, even though you're both the company, like even though you're the owner of the company and you're you and you think it's the same, it's different. Your company cannot pay you 50 per hour. Your company is going to pay you maybe 50 per hour, but it has to hold back the taxes and send those taxes to the government every month. People forget that. Your company has to hold back its own taxes for payroll and send the taxes to the government every month by the 15th of the following month. As if that is not clear, please ask, because that is something that unfortunately most people haven't come to terms with. Even some of the nurses that I'm working with right now, I say it gets to the 15th of the month and I'm saying, hey, we need to make a payroll remittance to the government, and say, oh, I forgot. I used all the money that was in my bank account. But hey, we need to send payroll deductions to the government today or this week or by the 15th. And so some people then turns like, okay, I'm going to go back and pull the money from my personal line of credit and put it back in the company so that the company can pay its payroll taxes. Please, 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 once you become a company, you are your own employer and your company has to withhold taxes from you and send that payroll remittance to the government every month.
And that is why I want to add that sometimes, I mean, there's a question here from Facebook. We're going to get to that. That's why I want to add that becoming an incorporation also, you got to look at your struggle at the moment. When I mean your struggle at the moment, the people that have high need for finances at a certain time, like people that are trying to buy a house, trying to pay back some high loans, I don't think incorporation is good for them at that time, because some of your money is going to be held back to fulfill the company expenses. Whereas if at that time you're a sole proprietor, you can pretty much take the money and use it as much to cover a lot of those basic expenses. And then once you have a good stability, then you can pay back the tax at the end of the year. But at least you're not being limited by your company obligations because you're
Yeah,
incorporated.
but there's a way around that though. There's
There's
a
a
way
way
around.
because of
Yes.
dividends.
Well, yes, you can pay yourself dividends, and then so you can choose to only pay yourself dividends. You can choose to only pay yourself salary. You can choose to pay yourself a combination of salaries and dividends.
Right.
Right. Now, which one is better for you? It depends on your situation.
Situation.
And then a good example I like to give, for example, okay, think of, I'm going to give the example of maybe a person, male or female, who is thinking of starting a family and they want to be able to benefit from EI at some point when they are maternity, paternity leave. They want to be able to benefit from that. If you only pay yourself a dividend, you're not contributing into EI.
Into
That
mhm.
means when you go on maternity, paternity leave, you're not going to be paid any EI while you're on that. So you would have saved on taxes throughout the period of receiving dividends. But that
Right.
means when you go on maternity, paternity leave, there's nothing coming back to you because you never contributed into it.
Hmm.
So yes, dividend is great for saving taxes, but is that the ideal thing for you? It's an individual question. Again, with the dividends, when you pay yourself the dividend, for the most part, I think you don't contribute into the Canada pension plan, Quebec
No,
pension
you
plan. You
don't.
don't contribute
You
into
don't.
that with your dividend. That
Mm-hmm.
means, do you have your own retirement plan? Meaning that when you get to retirement, are you going to be depending on the CPP, the QPP? If you were thinking about that, then you should be contributing into it. And that means you should be paying yourself some amount of your money as a salary and paying taxes on it so that when you get to that stage, you can benefit from that as well. Is that
Mm-hmm.
ideal for your situation? Maybe, maybe not. It comes back to your personal situation.
Right.
Now, dividend versus salary. If you are receiving a dividend and you're thinking about contributing into an RRSP, the dividend doesn't give you any room to contribute to an RRSP because it's not
Mm-hmm.
considered earned income.
Yeah.
And so if contributing into an RRSP is important to you and you're paying yourself on the dividends, you cannot contribute into the RRSP because you're not accumulating any more room for your RRSP. That's another thing to
But
consider.
you see the trick with the government, they don't consider dividend earnings, right? They don't consider it
Earned income,
income.
yes.
But yet, but then you gotta pay taxes on it. So that's
You pay
double.
personal income taxes, but you don't you pay personal income taxes on it because every form of income gets taxed, and those that's like something that we can dig
But it's
deeper
not.
into. Right? There's a
Yeah.
question on TikTok here. How much does Quebec pay maximum EI monthly for a person who lost their job? There's a calculation for that. It depends on how much you have contributed into it. So
Hmm.
this it pays you up to a certain percentage of your monthly income, but
Yeah.
I don't quote me on that. I don't know what the number is. I love your
We have
content.
to.
Any expert if it's really worth it to pursue CPA, that's a personal choice, man. So if you wanted to message me and talk about that, that's I don't know. It's a personal choice. Why do you want to be a CPA? We have a question coming from Facebook. The tax form you had up a few minutes ago mentioned that as a sole proprietor, you can claim rent. Which percentage of rent can be claimed as a travel nurse? It depends. That's a question that you would have to meet me to talk about. It
Yeah.
depends. Now, let me throw out some scenarios right there. Let's say you live in Quebec. No, I'm not going to use Quebec because Quebec is complicated. Let's say you live in Alberta and you have your house, you got your mortgage, you got your stuff right there. And now you are out in New Brunswick for your travel nursing assignment, but you maintain your home in Alberta.
Hmm.
The only reason that you have rent in New Brunswick is because of your
It's
business.
because. Hmm.
So the vast majority, maybe all, but don't quote me on that. You have to speak to your accountant. The vast majority of those expenses in New Brunswick will be considered business expenses because you
Right.
maintained your residence, you maintained your stuff in Alberta. The only reason you're out
Hmm.
there is for
It's for work.
business. Now, what percentage of your rent can be claimed as a travel nurse? Again, this depends. Are we talking about the rent,
Personal rent.
your personal rent, which you would have anyway, whether or not you were a nurse? The answer there again is not yes and no. It depends. Now,
Right.
if you have a home office, if you have a home office, it comes down to how much of your home is being used for business. Let's say 1/5 of your home is being used for business, and you are sole proprietorship. There is a part of the form that I showed before. This part of the form here, which relates to home office expenses, there's a calculating of home office expenses for business use, and this is on the sole proprietor form. If your home is being used for business, and let's say 1/5 of your home is being used for business, now 1/5 of everything related to these expenses will be deductible on your taxes. That will be your heat, your electricity, your insurance, your maintenance, your mortgage interest. If you don't have mortgage, again, I didn't say mortgage, I said the mortgage interest, not the whole mortgage amount. If you don't have a mortgage, then you replace that with rent. So your rent, your insurance, your electricity, in the proportion of your home being used for business. In this example, I said 1/5. So 1/5 of
Hmm.
your home being used for business, 1/5 of all of these expenses will be
Hmm.
allocated or allocatable to your business.
Right.
And this is a sole proprietorship form. If you were a corporation, the calculation is different. But this one here is basically for
Sole proprietor.
the sole proprietorship.
Hmm.
Okay.
There's another question here.
If you take money out from your business to your personal account and ensure that you return it before the end of the fiscal year, do you still get taxed on that amount? Short answer is no. If you took money out of your corporation and you put it back, it is a loan. So it's a loan to you, the shareholder, and you pay it back within the same period. No, there's no taxing on that. That's a short answer. Next question. As an incorporation, when you lease a vehicle as a company, can you pay it directly from your business account or from your personal account? If a corporation leases a vehicle in the corporation's name, the payment for the vehicle come from the company's bank account.
What if it's in the owner's name because the corporation don't yet have a credit history to sign a credit on a car?
then the expenses come from your bank account, but your company gets to reimburse you for the use
Mhm.
of your car. There is a calculation for that. You have to keep your mileage logs. The
Okay.
CRA recommends, I think right now it's 61 cents per kilometer, but it's there on the CRA website. I
I
love
think
to
we're
reach out to you. I'm pretty new in Canada. On whatever platform you're watching this, there's a link in my bio. And so click on the link in my bio. It will be a link to a link tree. The first link on that link tree takes you to a form. Just go on the form, put your email, put your phone number, and send me a message, and I'll respond to you, and then we can schedule something. I think we answered all
wow.
the questions there.
Yeah, I think we've answered. Well, thank you so much, Ida. We're always blessed to have you and your wisdom with taxes. Keep shooting your questions, guys. Keep shooting your questions. We're watching the questions. I feel like we have a lot to talk about this specific topic. We can really go in depth and really explain to people what dividends is, what are the pros and the cons, like really go in depth into each of the branches. Have a whole Zoom just about sole proprietor, have a whole video just about incorporation, just so that people really have a feeling of what this is all about, and they can always click to that specific video to get that specific information.